Hey everyone, we're back, and this time not just with a bonus episode, but to announce the start of our third season.
Woo!
The first episode of Season 3 will be released on Monday, September 28th, and we can't wait for you to hear it. So today we just wanted to talk to you all about who we are, how we got here, and about our upcoming season and what it's going to look like.
My name is Jackie Burnett, and I'm currently sitting outside on the horseshoe at the University of South Carolina with Aidan Thomason.
Woo, go Gamecocks!
First and foremost, we just wanted to thank you all so much for listening. Whether you just started listening this summer, or if you've been listening since our very first episode, this podcast would not be possible without you all tuning in to hear each and every episode.
So we started this podcast with the goal of sharing the human stories of refugees. So in Season 1, we interviewed local people in the Carolinas who are involved with the crisis here. In Season 2, we hopped the state line and went to visit Clarkston, Georgia, the most diverse square mile in America, and talked to refugees and leaders in the Clarkston community. Along the way, we found common threads of resilience in the face of adversity, compassion, and most of all, humanity that crosses borders, cultures, and experiences.
For Season 3, we wanted to go global and take a look at each of the top 10 refugee crises as identified by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, also known as UNHCR. Each episode will focus on one of the crises, bringing you up-to-date information on what is going on, as well as interviews with people who are refugees from those countries or are working in them on behalf of refugees.
We also want to point out that while we're drawing from the official numbers this season, we at Seeking Refuge take a very holistic definition of the word refugee. Refugees can come from anywhere for a variety of reasons, and you don't have to be registered to need refuge. The 10 crises that we're going to cover this season are by no means the only ones you should care about, but because of their magnitude, they're often mentioned in the news, and you've probably interacted with people from those places in your daily life, wherever you live. We're going to hear voices from places like Syria, Afghanistan, and Myanmar, allowing people to share the experiences that aren't talked about in the headlines.
Speaking of the news, we're also excited to announce that this season we will be periodically releasing short episodes focused on refugee current events and news. We've already released one news episode, focusing on the recent fires in the Greek refugee camp Moria. You can find it on Spotify and iTunes with the rest of our episodes.
In addition to adding new segments to our show, we also added some new members to the podcast for this season. You might hear some new voices, and we've never really introduced ourselves in the first place, so we've decided now to switch gears and introduce everyone working on the show. So we're going to start by introducing each other, so without further ado, Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. My name is Jackie Burnett. I am a current student at the University of South Carolina. I'm a sophomore majoring in global studies and geography with a minor in Spanish. And I recently joined the podcast this past spring. I'm so excited for Season 3 and for everything that's to come in the future. I've had so many favorite memories in just a short amount of time. I always love hanging out with everyone on the team and talking about our hopes and dreams for the podcast. But related directly to episodes in the podcast itself, I absolutely loved being able to interview Parnaz Fortan about her book, memoir, Home as a Stranger. She was so phenomenal to talk to. I had this idea of how the conversation was going to go, and then she just completely switched it up and would talk about female repression in Iran versus the United States, and it was so fascinating, and she just had such great things to share. It was just cool to hear from her, not as a former refugee, but as an author, as a woman who has lived in multiple countries and her experiences with those. Everything that she mentioned was just really cool. And it was a Zoom interview because of the pandemic, and now we conduct a lot of Zoom interviews, so it was also a nice experience to get ready for our third season. Aidan, now that I've talked about myself, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Aidan Thomason. I'm a junior at the University of South Carolina. I am an international studies major and a history major. I'm learning Spanish. I've been working on the podcast for 2 years now. I've been here pretty much since it started, so it's been super exciting to see how much it's grown and changed in the last couple years. I've had a lot of good experiences, but I think my favorite memory from the show was when we recorded for our Clarkston season. So we did a couple interviews by phone later, but we did the bulk of the interviews by just driving to Clarkston one day and talking to a bunch of people. So we got up at like 7 and drove there, and then we're back at like midnight. We talked to so many people who had such interesting and diverse experiences and who are doing so much with their lives, and it's just a whole day of being constantly impressed by how resilient and strong and motivated people are to make a difference in the world.
So now that we've interviewed each other, we're going to start talking to the rest of the members of our podcast team in order to introduce them to you all as well.
So my name's Claire Mattis. I'm a freshman. I just joined the team about a week ago, and I'm just super interested in the topic of refugees and anything involving that. And when I found out about this podcast, I just thought this is the perfect way to get involved. Started my 8th grade year. I attended a lecture at a local college my mom was teaching at, where some refugee students had gotten a scholarship to move from Syria to the United States. And I listened to them talk about the Syrian crisis, and I had no idea what was going on. And so after that, that kind of opened my eyes, and I started researching, and I just haven't stopped since then.
What is your favorite episode of the podcast?
So I just started listening last week, but so far it's season 2, episode 3 with Pastor Trent Deloach. It was just a really interesting episode for me, especially because my involvement in my church and what I think they should be doing to help refugees. And I just thought he set a really good example for local churches. Personally, I'm really excited to meet new people, like all the people we'll be interviewing. I think it's a good way to just learn other perspectives and really talk to people who've experienced these things that I've been researching for so many years. And I'm just interested to finally hear firsthand people's opinions on this.
My name is Nathanael. I'm a senior communications major and super excited to join the podcast this semester. I didn't really know much about it coming into it, but it looks like a really, really great opportunity. I actually listened to several of the episodes this week. My favorite so far is the interview with Parnaz Furutan. I think she just touches on so many interesting aspects of the refugee situation and combines them all so efficiently. So I really enjoyed listening to that podcast. I've worked with refugees in the past. I've been to Clarkston several times, and I actually entered university as an international studies major. So I've always thought about going into NGO management, helping with aid organizations and things like that. But somewhere along the line in college, I realized that I like communication and telling people stories. So when I saw that there was a practical opportunity for me to do that through this podcast, I was absolutely have to jump on that.
Hello, my name is Patrick Anderson. I'm currently a junior at the University of South Carolina, and I'm double majoring in international business and finance.
Do you have plans for what you want to do post-college with those majors?
I'm not totally sure yet. I'm contemplating applying to go to law school or possibly graduate school in international affairs or something along those lines. From an early age, I've always been interested in different cultures, and kind of going along with that, I feel like the refugee crisis is so important and doesn't get a lot of coverage or information, at least not when I was growing up. So it seems like something that's important, and something that I wanted to learn more about. So that's kind of how I got started. Probably the Salva episode was my favorite, just because it was kind of a independent thing in that I was in contact with him. It was kind of my first independent interview, because the first one, obviously, the older members were really helping me out. So it was definitely scary, especially interviewing someone who has had such an impact on refugees in South Sudan like Salva. But I really enjoyed talking to him, and I would say I learned a lot just from the entire experience. I'm really excited to continue to interview people with totally different experiences. I would say the first 3 interviews I've done, the people have completely different stories, and I kind of hope to continue that with just talking to people from different places, different upbringings, and just kind of different perspectives on the global refugee crisis.
Hi guys, My name's Esha. I'm a sophomore at USC's Honors College, and I'm currently majoring in biochemistry with a minor in history. I'm so excited to be a part of the podcast this year. I was like a listener because Jackie, who's with me right now, introduced me to it, and I've loved listening to some of the previous episodes, and I'm excited to be a part of the episodes this year. So as of right now, I think after college I want to go to med school, but I also have an interest in diplomacy, and like besides just like regular school subjects, I also really like learning languages. So I think that ties into like my passion for like diplomacy and public policy. I really like Patrick's episode with Salva Dutt. I think it was so like organic, and I really liked Salva's story. So, and I think that's maybe that was like the second or third episode that I watched, and I was like, I think maybe I just started getting interested in the podcast, or I just reached out to you, but that really like cemented my, I don't know, like love for working on the team and kind of like what you guys are passionate about and what you're doing. So
yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well. I know you're currently working on an episode that's going to come out in season 3. Do you want to preview that a little bit for our audience?
We're going to be talking about some of the healthcare issues mainly that Syrian refugees face. So her organization basically works with refugees in northern Syria. I feel like a lot of the time, growing up in the West, we hear about the Syrian conflicts and Syrian refugees, but we feel super separated from it. So I'm also trying to get her perspective on kind of the reality of being a refugee in Syria, because we hear so much about it, but in the West we have this privilege to not be directly involved with it. But her organization is based in the Middle East, so I'm really excited to see her perspective. I hope you guys just keep listening to the podcast. We're super excited for this season, and I think all of us have been working really hard to get some exciting people to interview and just chat with, so I hope you guys are excited to join us.
So now you know a little bit about what's coming for our show and who we are. The first episode of season 3 drops in 2 weeks on Monday, September 28th. So be sure to tune in to see what we have in store. If you're excited about this new season, be sure to tell us in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and rate us on iTunes or wherever you listen, and please find us on social media at Refuge Podcast. As always, a huge shout out to Maxey International House for supporting us, a big thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.